Well, welcome back to Compounding Interest, and this will be Compounding Interest Video 3. And what we want to do in this video is take a look at and understand compounding periods. So if you would, you bring up your workbook for compounding interest and head over to Practice 2. Little worksheet down here in the bottom. Practice 2 is where I'm going to be. And right now you probably have one that has annually in here. So let me do this. I'll hide this comment and we'll talk about this in just a bit. But right now, I'm going to change this back to annually, which means yearly. And what we need to understand about that is that when we say that the compounding is annually, that means we're going to apply simple interest just one time in a year. And so what's going to happen here is that we're going to invest this $5,000 at 4% for 10 years, and it's going to be compounded once a year, annually. And so that's why we've got time as a 1 here, because as you recall in our formula, I equals PRT, T must be in terms of 1 year, and so we don't have to do any conversion. We just put a 1 because it's already going to be 1 year. Now these periods here, 10 of these represent a time frame of 1 year. I have to apologize. I was just reviewing the video. That is not correct. It was a long weekend. I got to bed very late last night after that trip down to Cal Poly. So each one of these periods represents 1 year, and so 10 of these would be 10 years. Make sure we've got that listed correctly. So, and then here time always has to be in terms of a year. So if we're compounding once a year, time has to be 1 year. If we were compounding every 2 years, we could put a 2 there. But because it's once a year, we have to make sure that we're showing how much time in terms of years that we are compounding. So I hope that clarifies that. By all means, ask questions if not. And the reason why is because we are compounding once per year. So for 10 years times once per year, that would be a total of 10 compounding periods. So how does this work? Well, we start with the $5,000. And then we put in our interest rate. And then our time. And apply simple interest formula. And this is principal times rate times time. And so with that calculation then, we get $200 in interest. And then to calculate the account balance, what we had been calling maturity value, is the principal plus the interest. And that's what this formula is here. So you can take a look at that as we're going along here. And then the compounded interest amount at this point is simply the first amount of interest that we calculated at the end of year 1. Well, let's move on to the next accounting period. What's going to happen? Well, this beginning principal is actually the ending account balance from the previous compounding period. And so then we go through and put that value in here, and then do the simple interest calculation again. And then once again update the balance. And then add the interest. Previous interest plus the new interest that was earned. And so that gets done 10 times. Because 10 years compounded annually. Now let's take a look at compounding quarterly and see how that's different. So now it's going to be quarterly. So I'll change this, and you can do this on yours too. Quarterly. What is quarterly? Well, let's show that comment here. And it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to insert a comment like this so you know this. So quarters are breaking the year up into 4 periods, or every 3 months. So there's 4 quarters in a year consisting of 3 months. So quarter 1 is January, February, March. Quarter 2, April, May, and June, and so on. And so it's important to know that quarter 2 begins on April 1st. Quarter 3 begins on October 1st. And, of course, quarter 1 begins on January 1st. So it's good to know this about quarters. Well, let's see how this is going to change then. We're still going to, oh, and let's change our time. We don't need to do it for 10. Let's do it for 5. 5 years. But compounded quarterly. Now, if we were compounding annually, we would just need these 5 compounding periods. But now, because it's quarterly, 4 times a year, we are going to apply this calculation 4 times a year. So, how many of these periods would that be in 1 year? I'll take a pause here and let you think about that. That's right. If you said 4, you are correct, because we're going to do it 4 times. So this would be the first 3 months of the year, the next 3 months, the next 3 months, and the next 3 months. And so that would be 12 months. And this would represent a year's time. But because we're compounding quarterly, or once every 3 months, then we have to have 4 compounding periods in 1 year. But to do that, then, we also have to adjust time. So we can keep our principal the same. We can do those formulas okay. But this has to be adjusted, because time must be in terms of a year. So how many years is 1 quarter? Now, in the previous videos, we have learned that we could take equal sign and we can do 3 divided by 12. But most of us know that a quarter of a year is 0.25, 1/4, 0.25. So 0.25 represents 3 months of time. And so then you could just copy this all the way down to the number of periods that we actually need. So if we're doing it for 5 years and we're doing it quarterly, how many compounding periods do we need? There's a great test question for you. 5 years we're going to keep that money compounded, and we're going to do the compounding every quarter. So how many periods of time would that be? 5 times 4. 20. 20 periods are needed. So this 5-year time frame is going to be represented by this many of these compounding periods right here. And that would represent 5 years compounded every 3 months. So we need to adjust the time in every one of these calculations down to the 20th period. And I'll just go ahead and take it down to the rest of them here. But this is what we asked here as far as our question goes, our calculation. We wanted to calculate that. And so, at the end of 5 years compounding quarterly, we ended up with an account balance of $6,100.95 and an accumulated amount of $1,195. Now, a logical question is, does it matter whether you compound quarterly, annually? Do you get more money, less money, depending on the periods of time that you compound? So, well, what we can do here, let's just write this number down. We compounded quarterly for 5 years and ended up with 6,100. In fact, how about this? Let's just go ahead and type that number in so we remember it. $6,100.95. $6,100.95. And then let's go back and we'll compound it annually and see what number we come up with. So we're going to change this to annually for 5 years. So we need 5 compounding periods. So we've got to change this back to a 1. And let's see how much money we ended up with here. 5 years. Well, here we are, $6,083. So by compounding more frequently, we did end up with some more money. Well, let's see how much we ended up with here. This was compounding quarterly, and this was compounding annually. So we ended up with close to $18 more by compounding more often. So how many compounding periods would we need if we were to compound daily for 5 years? Now, we are not going to do that because it would be quite a few. Well, we can calculate that. We know there's 365 days in a year, and if we want to compound for 5 years, we could just do that multiplication. 365 times 5 years, 1,825 compounding periods. And so you would have to take these calculations here all the way down. We're only at 25 here, and we'd have to get to 1,825 rows or compounding periods. So we're not going to do that many. We're going to keep things a little bit simpler than that. So for this video, your next step is to move on over here to Compound Interest Worksheet 1. And you have some practice there. Very similar to one of the practices we just did. We've got 5 years. In fact, I'll tell you what. Change it to 6. Let's make it a little more challenging. Compound it quarterly for 6 years. And put in your entire formulas and see how you do, and have me come around and by all means ask questions as you go through and build your compound interest table. So for this video, just get Compound Interest Worksheet 1 completed and have me come by and take a look at that.